الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله أوله بلا أول كان قبله وآخره بلا آخر يكون بعده الذي قصرت عن رؤيته أبصار الناظرين وعجزت عن نعته أوهام الواصفين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا حبيبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين أبي القاسم محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وعلى الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الدائم على أعدائهم وغاصب حقوقهم ومنكر فضائلهم ومناقبهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد قال إمام جعفر الصادق عليه السلام في زيارة عاشوراء إني سلم لمن سالمكم وحرب لمن حاربكم. صلاة الله محمد وعلى محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل
We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for giving us the opportunity to gather once again and be blessed by the remembrance of a personality who is not clearly mentioned in history during the period of the Prophet or during the period of Amirul Mu'mineen or Imam Hassan. The manabi, the sources of references, sources of history, the books of history have not really mentioned much about Hazrat Hur. You don't find anything until the time where he is seen in Karbala or just before Karbala. There could be many factors or many reasons why Hazrat Hur is not been recorded in history as such. One could be that we may have lost some of the things that were there in history, perhaps, we don't know. Or it could be that he was somebody who wasn't actively involved with any sort of political or militarism as such, taking any sides. But he was living his life, he was a Muslim, he has nothing to do with what's going on, and he was living a life as a Muslim, as they say, bitaraf. He wasn't on anyone's side as such. And maybe because of his tribe, which was well known, Bani Tamim, his tribe was, and it's a very famous tribe among the Arabs, known for his courageous nature, for his chivalry, so on and so forth. Perhaps he may stand out among the tribe as a great fighter, and could have been a mercenary, could be hired out for certain expeditions, for example, to work for this Khalifa or that Khalifa perhaps, and not having a personal loyalty towards a group or towards a clan as such. That could be a possibility when we try to analyze it. But for sure, when we reflect upon, or when his presence become more colorful in the pages of history, we find him to be having utmost respect for Fatima Zahra. This is very fascinating, right? And she becomes the point of departure for him, towards Imam Husayn alayhi salam. Recognition of who she was brought him to Imam Husayn. So it's quite interesting that a layperson, and perhaps we could connect to Hazrat Hur on a greater level than some of the other ashab who were companions, who were the family members of Imam Husayn. Habib ibn Mazahir was a mushtahid, was a scholar, was Sahabi of Rasulullah. But Hur was a person unknown in history, a layperson, and then he had that love of Bibi Fatima Zahra, and that changed him completely. So it's really interesting, and And as we said, Karbala, that's why it becomes an eternal legacy. That's our topic, that Karbala, is an eternal legacy. And the people who are involved in making Karbala are from all different, levels of the society of that time. And they become the source of inspiration. And this is not just how shall I say, a poetic sort of idea or inspiration that, oh, Karbala is an eternal legacy. The Masumeen alayhi salam, they themselves have said that. Right? Like for example, 6 Imam period is 100 years or after Imam Husayn. Where in Ziyarat he says, Inni silmun liman salamakum, muharmun liman harabakum. Well, Imam Husayn doesn't exist anymore. What are you talking about? Whoever is your friend, is our friend, and whoever fights with you, Imam Husayn is dead. What are you talking about, right? So, even the Masumeen alayhi salam, they have promoted the idea, or they have encouraged the idea of Karbala becoming the source of inspiration and an eternal legacy, a timeless legacy, through which one finds salvation. Safinatul Najat, that's why it is. Innal Husayn Misbah without saying. So even today, when we look at, we have a Husayn and we have a Yazid. That's why there's a very famous saying. However, once again, there isn't any source of this being in the Hadith literature that every day is Ashura and every land is Karbala. It's a very famous saying. Some say it's a Hadith, some say. And it's been kind of repeated by the scholars a lot. But when you go for the proper sort of Hadith literature and try to find out the source of this, whether it was a Hadith or not, we don't really find as such. But it reflects the reality that yes, there is every Zaman and every period you have a Yazid. And in every period you have a Husayn. Not only in the macrocosmic reality, but even in the microcosmic reality. We have our own Shimrs and we have our own Husayns in us. And we have to see that, are we, on the side of that light, of that guidance, of that misbah, or are we on the side of, Yazid, which is in us. Right? And it's a constant battle, of ourself with our nafs. Alaykum salam. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And in order for coming out victorious in this battle and to be on the side of Imam Husayn alayhi salam, it is very much required of us to analyze, the macrocosmic reality of Imam Husayn and of history, what happened in the past. And through that we could relate to, some of these personalities that existed at that time, the tendencies where these individuals had, whether that be Marisal or Habib ibn Mazahir or Zuhair, for example, those tendencies are pretty much the same. And we all have that. They were human beings, we are humans as well, right? So we still have those tendencies in us. So it's important to kind of reflect, go back a bit and see what really happened. And as we kind of looked at the life of Abu Abdullah al-Husayn, who was the champion or who was the leader of this uprising, about this legacy, we discussed a bit about his birth. And then last night we looked at how he was raised and how he was during the time of the Prophet. They say that at the demise of the Prophet, at the shahadat of the Prophet, Imam Husayn alayhi salam was 7 years old. And this is the beginning of the patience period of Imam Husayn. Being quiet in front of the zulm is not considered as being coward, but rather it's considered as being patient. And that's what Karbala teaches us, and that's what Imam Husayn teaches us. And the way to be patient is through remembering what is haqq and what is batil. And that's what we do in every Muharram. and we manifest, we reflect in our actions that we are not somebody who accepted the oppression or who accepts the oppression from the Yazid or from the Yazid of the time, but rather it is not time yet. But rather it is the time of being patient. And being patient with the understanding of Haqq and Batil. So that when the Imam comes, we are ready. Labbaik. Labbaik ya Mahdi is Labbaik ya Husayn. So the remembrance of Imam Husayn alayhi salam, the uprising of Imam Husayn alayhi salam, that we do every year, that our parents have taught us sabr, the reality of sabr, the truthful nature of the sabr, what patience is. And that's what Imam Husayn did. That's what Amirul Mu'mineen did during that period of, the three Khalifas who were there at that time. One after the other, the atrocities, we're going to look into detail some of them to understand what they've been through. And eventually, when the time was right, they responded. They did the right thing when it was required from them, with everything which they had. And sabr teaches us that. Patience teaches us that. And that source, as we said, is the legacy of Abu Abdullah Husayn Islam. Now, when we look at Imam Husayn, obviously, even during when the Prophet was still alive, the deterioration of the ummah, the deviation of the ummah have started. Although, as this may be a repetition of History 101, but it is something that we remind us that what things went wrong and where it actually started. That's why when we say, Allahumma lana awwala zalimin zalama haqqa Muhammadin wa alim wa akhirata anna wa la zalim. The first who laid the foundation of the zulm upon Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. That's what we recite in Ziyarat Ashura, which actually comes from the sixth Imam and from Hadith Qudsi. Ziyarat Ashura. There are two ziyarat which are Hadith Qudsi. One is Ziyarat Ali Yasin and one is Ziyarat Ashura. These are the two ziyarat. Right? So, this Allahumma la na'wala zaliman zalama haqqa Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, we have to analyze and we have to see where it actually started. And what was the reason of it to begin. I'm not too much of a person who kind of try to see things and maybe it is wrong, but in the case that, enemy, they are our enemies, for example. No. The greatest enemy is ignorance. As Amir al-Mu'min says, jahalat jo hai sabse bada dushman hai insan. Insan, a human being, is an enemy of what he does not know. The point is to rectify that ignorance that is there. For example, what we see in the West, for instance, which is now talk of the ulama and scholars, and I will bring it to the surface, and I may be, people may talk bad about me or be critical about me, when, it's a failure to a degree of us living here in the West to introduce the community who are non-Muslims the reality of what marjaiyat is, what an ayatollah really means, who they are and what they are. If the people around me doesn't understand that, then it is very easy for them to taunt and to make fun of, because they don't know what it is. Right? So the point is, what it's coming out is either out of ignorance or it is out of takabbur, arrogance. Even the arrogance is because of ignorance. Pharaoh was arrogant because he was ignorant of the fact, who Musa is. Right. So, what our community needs to do is to increase that awareness. Instead of taking things as you are my enemy and I am, you are evil and I'm not, or the West is evil, or this. The point is not. The point right now is to come to terms with and prepare the groundwork for the return of the Mahdi. That all walks of life, all community, not just the Shia people, but the Taoists, the Buddhists and the Hindus, everybody who will work for humanity, they will gather together to support him. If we, as soon as we try to polarize things, then we are actually not progressing to create that groundwork, because we are polarizing. I'm religious, you're not religious. I believe in Wilayat of Ali and I'm the one who will go in Jannah, but you're not. This is polarization, will do harm. So it really goes back to our failure to a certain degree, that we haven't been able to fully introduce the school of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam and pointed out to what Shia spirituality really mean to the place that we are living in, so that these people can understand what really means to be an Ayatollah, what really means to be a supreme leader, what really means to be, a marja, right? And then once that is understood to a greater degree, perhaps that sort of respect will remain, and also maybe it may build bridges, because this is right now one of these discussions that is going on, that we find in the news and here and there. Although, I'll just mention this in the margin as well. For instance, you did not find this type of disrespect from the previous leadership because of perhaps certain advisors maybe the previous leadership had, and one of them was Wali Nasr, who is the son of Sayyid Hussein Nasr to Obama. He was the advisor, and Wali Nasr is pretty interesting, academic scholar. Shia Revival is one of his books, and Nasr we know for sure, Sayyid Hussein Nasr, who Sayyid Hussein Nasr is, what I mean. Amazing personality, well grounded in Shia spirituality, right? So, as perhaps the advisor of the previous president was Wali Nasr, when it comes to Shia world, that may have kind of always, and that's why you find always Obama is saying supreme leader. It was not taunting, it was not disrespectful. The principles which they had, the differences which they had, they would mention that, all options on the table, so on and so forth. But when it comes to have that mutual respect, that was always there. That we tend not to see, for example, now what's happening. So it requires of us to a greater degree to engage, to speak about spirituality, Shia spirituality, and the meaning behind all of these things, and what marja'iyat is, and who they are, and what they are, and to point out to some of the double standards that are there, that exist. If somebody says, this is now discussion right now in England at the moment. If somebody says something against, death to something, you're reading in the news some band, some musical band and stuff, that becomes hate speech. But somebody draws a cartoon of a prophet, that doesn't become hate speech, that becomes art, that becomes, what I mean? That's like, come on, you ought to be careful, when you're using those same sort of principles. Let's be together on these principles, and these are good principles. Yes, it's hate speech, one shouldn't be saying these things. It might create havoc and this, so on and so forth. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now, when we go back in history, we find that, even during the time of the Prophet, when Prophet was still alive,
And this is in Sahih Bukhari, this is in Ahmad ibn Hanbal, this is in Muslim as well, and in 3 different books. In Bukhari mentions this, that when Prophet asked for a pen and paper, one of them, who became a leader of the Islamic Ummah, said, this man is gone crazy. And he is, basically saying things because of the effect of illness that this person has. So this is the beginning of that deviation, that you have a prophet. Now, once again, this goes back to the lack of understanding who a prophet is. The Quran is saying, مَا آتَاكُمُ الرَّسُولُ فَخُذُوهُ. Whatever Rasul gives, you take it. For you, Hezbuna Kitab Allah, then what does the Kitab says? مَا آتَاكُمُ الرَّسُولُ فَخُذُوهُ. Whatever Rasul gives, you just take. If you are saying that book is enough, the very book is saying that مَا آتَاكُمُ الرَّسُولُ فَخُذُوهُ. Right. So now why are you going against the book itself? Right? So this points out to a lack of understanding of what you're really standing for. The very principle that you're making, you're breaking that principle. In one way you're saying this is hate speech, and at the same time you're breaking the same principle. That's double standard right there. Right? So that's where it started. Imam Husayn was present at that time, and he's seeing all of these things that is taking place. Then while during the life of the Prophet mobilized, because just before Prophet became ill, he had marched towards Rome, which is the Battle of Tabuk, they call it. Surah Tawbah, Surah number 9, discusses the event of Tabuk. And this was actually, and all of the battles that you see within Islam, there seems to happen in order to point out to where haqq is, where truth is. And that is Ali. In every battle you will see that. Imam Ali's character is shown by the Prophet. In every battle. Even Tabuk, the battle never took place. Prophet never fought the Romans. He just marched towards Rome. But even here, when the Prophet appointed Ali to be the caretaker of Medina, people taunted Ali saying that, oh, the Prophet has not taken you. They were making a mockery of Ali. So Ali left Medina, came and met the Prophet as he was going. And he was in the outskirts of Medina. He had left already. And here the Prophet gives the hadith and manzilat. Oh Ali, you are at the same level or at the same status as Harun is to Musa. When Musa left, he appointed Harun. So as I left Medina, I have appointed you, which is an indication, which is a maqam of who Ali is. Right? When Prophet is regarding Ali as somebody who is like Harun to Musa, and the books of history which is recorded, the third Khalifa compares Ali to Marwan, who was cursed by the Prophet. Right? So you see the fall taking place in the Ummah. It started then and there. However, we haven't reached to the third. There are a couple of more things which happened in the first and second Khalifa as well. Sallallahu Muhammad wa alayhi. So, Prophet prepared a battalion with the leadership of Osama ibn Zayd, who was an 18-year-old. Once again, if you look at how much Prophet paid attention to the youth, he's appointing Osama, who was just an 18, as the leader of this battalion, and he is asking some of those who are rijal, some of those who are like proper strong men, like the first leader, Khalifa, the second Khalifa. They were all asked to go under the wing of Osama and go towards Rome. Right? The danger was there, so Prophet wanted everybody to be out of Medina because he was ill, and he wanted everybody to be out of Medina so that the transformation takes place swiftly and safely to Amirul Mu'mineen, because he had already sensed the reservation right from the very beginning of the declaration of Ghadir when that happens. Right? Even before that as well. But the clarity, it became more clear, in Ghadir. So the Prophet asked them to leave, they did not leave. Once again going against the wishes and the will of the Prophet, where the hukum and the command of the Prophet is the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the deviation, the deterioration already started during the time when Prophet was still alive. And Imam Husayn alayhi salam is watching all this, and he's 7 years old. And then right after that, like as we said that, communities, people may be on haqq and truth, but they have to be patient. Right? And right after the demise of the Prophet, the event of the door happened. Within few days. Right? Which is the burning of the door of the mother of Imam Husayn alayhi salam. They were ambushed, they were terrorized by this group. Right? Once again, there could be many reasons behind that for their behavior that they have. Right? And how Imam Ali alayhi salam was forced out. They are once again in the books of the Ahl Sunnah, in their hadith books, they are there. I have the sources and the references of that how Ali was pulled out in order that he pay allegiance to. Imam Husayn watching this, right? He was aware of all of this. And that is the period of the first Khalifa. Now when we look at when Imam Husayn alayhi salam, give me a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. During the time of the first Khalifa, he was 7 to 9. 7 years, Prophet died, and by the 9 years he was. Like 2 years he was during the time of the first Khalifa. And he has seen everything, the usurping of Fadak taking place. And another thing is in regards to, sometimes you have children who are 5 and 6, but in terms of their maturity, they may not have that to that greater degree. But we are talking about Imam Husayn here. The maturity of the Ahl Bayt alayhi salam and the household of Bani Hashim was well known, is renowned. Qasim at the age of 13 or 14, that is more sweeter than honey, for example. Right? That's their maturity. And as we have discussed this earlier as well, it's not the question of age, it's a question of maturity. And when the aql, when the intellect reaches its kamal and perfection, then a person can be at any age, but that person, that individual is mature. That child could be a 4-year-old. That's why the possibility of a child who is 4 is mature maybe in a field. Not in all fields, right? Maybe just in a field. And if this child who is 4 and 5 is an expert, he's a mathematician or something, is a miracle child, even people who are engineers or doctors, they will refer to this child because this child is a miracle child. Only in that field perhaps. So the possibility of somebody at the age of 4, 5, 6, being a miracle child in all fields is there too. If it is in that field, maybe that brain, the capacity of the brain is so vast that the possibility that one could be expert in all. And that's one of the proofs of the Imam Jawad at the age of 7 becoming an Imam, where he clearly, the history have recorded that he has clearly defeated the Rijal of the time. He has clearly defeated the scholars of that time. The chief Qazi was defeated in debates by Imam Jawad alayhi salam, because he has reached that kamal and perfection. And it also requires of understanding what aql is from a philosophical perspective. Aql, as they say according to Plato, is nothing but recollection. Knowledge is something that is recollection. That's why it becomes easy for us to learn. A couple of times a child is taught that this is glass or this is that, it just grabs it. Because we have already been taught this, what we are seeing in this dunya according to Plato. That's what knowledge is. So if my aql have that capacity to recollect higher principles at a younger age, possibility is there. Because these higher principles have already been taught to me. in that world, in that previous world. I'm just recollecting things here. So if I don't have distractions in this world, I have less distractions, then obviously it is easier for me to recollect. When I have distraction, the recollection is naturally less. I may have a glass on my face, but still I'll be looking at where my glasses is or where my keys are, because I'm distracted with things. But I'm not distracted then, I recollect where I kept the keys before, or it's in my pocket or something, you see. So aql is that. So we are talking about a child which is Husayn, yes, he may be 5 or 6 or 7, but in terms of his maturity is fascinating. First of all, he's the grandson of the Prophet, he's the Bani Hashim, and he's watching all of these things. And he's waiting for that right moment, which happens in Karbala. So he's gathering all this. He's seeing this, what's happening with the Ummah Islami. Right during the time of the Rasulullah, what happened? During the time of the first Khalifa, what happened? What they have done to, the mother. And then you have the second Khalifa period, once again, as we see that in that period. And what we see in terms of the Manabe, in terms of the sources of Hadith literature and Hadith, that utmost respect from these Khalifas to Imam Hassan and Imam Husayn. In the second, he was from 9 years to 19 years. The second Khalifa period, Imam Husayn was from the age of 9 till 19. That's a 10-year period. Some of the sources of Ahl Sunnah do point out to that the second Khalifa have taken Hassan and Husayn in the expedition of Persia. When they went and conquered Persia, Hassan and Husayn was present according to some of the Ahl Sunnah Manabe sources. However, the Shia sources, they majority deny that, and those who accept it, they say that perhaps due to unity, perhaps due to to be the source of strength for the Muslim army, they may have just participated. Because we do find Imam Ali alayhi salam advising the second Khalifa that you should not be participating in wars, because the possibility of you being killed is there. And if the Khalifa of the Muslimin is killed, that will weaken Islam. So you better stay in Medina and send other people. Who is advising this? It's Imam Ali advising it. A very fair advice when it comes to those principles and haqq and batil, right? That's why during the time of the third Khalifa, Imam Hassan and Imam Husayn were protecting the house of the third Khalifa. Because if the Khalifa of the Muslimin is killed, there will be chaos, right? If there is no leadership, it will be very chaotic. That's why even, I remember Imam Khomeini used to say that Saddam is better than no Saddam. A ruler is a ruler regardless of tyrant or zalim or not zalim. When you have a leadership, even if that is zalim leadership, still there is some law and order. There is no chaos, right? So we find him during the time of the second Khalifa from the age of 9 to 19, once again in a sabr and patience there, right? Where he clearly sees that the bid'ah have started in the ummah of Islam. The Tarawih, which was introduced by the second Khalifa, which wasn't there, he clearly and openly declares that there are two mut'as that I'm making it haram. One is the Tawaful Nisa and the other is the muta that is there, which was allowed during the time of the Prophet. He openly declares that. Something that is Prophet have given, Ma ta'akum Rasul fakhuzuhu. You are banning that. You are introducing certain things which were not there. The racism was very strong because the second Khalifa was very adamant about being an Arab, and his style of governance was based on that, which was actually replicated by Muawiyah, because when Muawiyah writes a letter to Zayd, in that letter he clearly mentions that an Ajam male cannot marry an Arab female, but an Arab man can marry an Ajam. The Arabs should not be at the front ranks when they go for a battle. The Ajam should be placed there. The property, so on and so forth. There's a whole list of things, because I don't have time to get in. And this was the style of the second Khalifa. This is how he basically governed, and which is once again very different to how Prophet was. Inna akramakumullah atqakum. But he governed it that way, and Husayn is watching all of this. He's seeing all of this. And the third Khalifa period was the worst. I mean, things have completely gone. At least during the time of the first and second, there was respect for the Khalifa, but for the third, they killed him. Who killed him? The Muslims who were there. They were so much, upset, and there were so much sort of injustices that were taking place during the time of the third Khalifa. It has reached to a point that they decided to basically, kill him. That's why Imam Hassan and Imam Husayn, Imam Ali have sent them to guard the house of the third Khalifa. The amount of disrespect was there. The ashab, like for example, Abdullah ibn Masud, who was a Katib of the Quran, who was a Sahabi of the Rasul, was beaten by the members of the Caliphate. Ammar Yasir was beaten to the extent that beat him so much that he was unconscious and he missed his Zuhr and Asr prayer by the guards of the Khalifa. In front of the Khalifa, of the third Khalifa, Ammar Yasir is a Sahabi of Rasul. Right? Abu Zar was exiled. He was sent by the governor of Sham, who was Muawiyah at that time, on a camel. An old man forced to come to Medina from all the way from Syria. Imam Husayn is watching all of this. Imam Ali is watching all of this. Imam Ali is actually teaching that sabr and patience to Hassan and Husayn. It is not time yet. Right? Then Abu Zar was exiled and he died in Rabda. There was a place, So continuously Imam Husayn was analyzing, was watching, was seeing what is going around him. And then, inshallah, we'll look at the period of Amirul Mu'mineen himself, which was just a 4-year period where he was chosen to be the head of the army of the right wing in Nahrawan, in Siffin, in Jamal, right? And he was leading and he was giving sermons. And that period with Imam Ali alayhi salam, he has reached to the age of 31. From the age of 19, from the age of 19 to 31, he was with Uthman. We said 9 to 19, that 10 years. At the age of 19, the third Khalifa takes the seat. From 19 to 31, he was, with the third Khalifa, and then from 31 to 34, because Imam Ali's rule was 34, the Khilafat. So he was 35, 36 when Imam Ali alayhi salam attained martyrdom. So we see that he was calculating all of these things. He was seeing that how things have changed. And even when prior the selection of the third Khalifa, because there was one second, the Saqifa was there, and when the third Khalifa was selected as well, there was another Saqifa, right? In which Imam Ali said that I'm not gonna be implementing the sunnah of Shaykhain, because Shaykhain were considered to be the first and second Khalifa, and whatever they have done, like for example Taraweeh, or for example other bid'ah that have been introduced, Imam Ali clearly said that I'm going to revive the sunnah of Rasulullah. I'm going to rule with the sunnah of Rasulullah. That's why Imam Husayn, when he leaves Medina, he writes the will to Muhammad ibn Hanafiya that the reason of my khuruj fi islah fi ummat jaddi, in order to create reform in the ummah of my grandfather, in order to revive the sunnah of Rasulullah. That is the purpose of my qiyam. He mentions that. So Karbala becomes Karbala because Imam Husayn has calculated all of these things. And then he has laid that foundation of eternal legacy. Like as we said, so that through this harakat, through this uprising, that becomes the source of the return of the 12th Imam, that we take lesson from. And as we reach to the part of the Masaib, and tonight, as we said that, it's the night of Hazrat Hur. Few lines in regards to Hazrat Hur alayhi salam, I'll mention it in English and then inshallah I will continue that in Urdu. It's very interesting to see how things unfolded for Hazrat Hur. As it says that the night where he was in his tent, he was trembling, and it was very unseen that a personality like a soldier like Hur is trembling. And people asked him that, "Oh Hur, why are you behaving like this?" He says, "I never thought that this day will come. I never thought that I have to choose between hell and heaven. I could clearly see on the other side, which is Imam Husayn's side, is the heaven, and this side is hell, and I have to make that choice." It could have been possible that Hur is somewhere else and the things were not presented to him in this fashion to make that choice. Then there is no taklif, there is no responsibility. Many were there far away and whatnot. That's why Imam Husayn said that when I give a call, Hal min nasir yansuruna, go far away. On the night of 9th, he clearly said that those who want to leave, go. Make sure that my call doesn't reach you. If it reaches you, it becomes wajib to support the wilayat, to be supportive of Imam Husayn. So Hur is been placed in a dilemma that he has to choose between haqq and batil, and he was trembling. As he had that love of Fatima Zahra, as we said, because we could clearly see when he stopped Imam Husayn alayhi salam, and that was the command from Ibn Ziyad. He was hired, or he was sent by Ibn Ziyad with 1,000 men to stop Imam Husayn from entering Kufa. And he clearly said that this is what I'm supposed to do, and I will fulfill what I'm supposed to do. I've been asked to stop you, and then I will wait till what Ibn Ziyad tells me. I'll send my men, I've written to Ibn Ziyad, and he has to reply to me. What am I supposed to do with you? For now, I've been asked to stop you, and so that you don't enter Kufa. That's my job. Then they had prayer. It was time for Zuhr. So Imam Hur went and prayed behind Imam Husayn alayhi salam. He came to Imam Husayn, and Imam Husayn said, "Okay, you go pray there. We are praying here." Hur said, "No, I'm going to pray behind you." So that consciousness was there, which is actually taqwa. Taqwa is consciousness, and taqwa it's been placed in all human beings. Not only Muslims are muttaqi, even a non-Muslim can be a muttaqi. Because we say, Alif Lam Mim, Dhalikal Kitab, La Raiba Fi, Hudal Lil. So the Quran is the book for who? For those who are muttaqi. Right? So a muttaqi doesn't have to be a Muslim. What taqwa really means, that nature of goodness in oneself. If one have that in a person, this person will naturally be attracted towards Quran, regardless of that person being a non-Muslim. That's how people convert. Because they have taqwa in them, then they become Muslim. Because taqwa is a universal reality. Taqwa is that consciousness of being a human being. That's what taqwa is. So Hur had that taqwa in him, that consciousness that this is the grandson of the Prophet. Sayyida Shabab Ahl Jannah. Who am I? I will pray behind him. And then after the prayer, the second incident, because Imam Husayn wanted to go, and then Hur stops, holds the horse of Imam Husayn. Then Imam Husayn says, may your mother cry on you, O Hur. Now, as I mentioned last year as well, I mention again, it's for all of us to, فَذَكِّرِ النَّفَعَةِ الذِّكْرَ. There is nafi, there is faida in zikr. And that is, Imam Husayn will never use this type of language. It's not Sha'an-e Husaynist, and it's not in the Sha'an, and it's not in the caliber of Imam Husayn to speak it that way, may your mother cry on me. But Imam Husayn is waking up Hur. What does Hur reply? Hur says, if I knew your mother was not Fatima, I would have said the same thing. Hur knew who is the mother of Husayn. So Imam Husayn orchestrated, Imam Husayn prepared all and everyone. And Imam Husayn wanted personalities, people like Hur, who are conscious, pure, khalis, sincere people. Wahab the same. Wahab was a Christian. Imam Husayn never said, oh, you say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, I am the grandson of the Prophet. No. On the contrary, Imam Husayn digged the well for Wahab. On the contrary, Imam Husayn provided a treasure for a person who is in the desert to live life happily. But what did Wahab do? Wahab came to support Imam Husayn because he had that taqwa, that consciousness, that God-wariness. Yeah, he may be a Christian, but he had that taqwa, and that's why he came and he became shaheed. That purity was there in Wahab. John the same, one of the slaves of Abu Zar, he was pure, sincere, and that's what Karbala wanted. Karbala wanted pure and sincere souls. Imam Husayn wanted those pure individuals who will become role models for the future. For us today, after 1200 years, we are speaking about Hur. And not only us who are lay people, said Muhsin Hakim, Marja of the all Shia world. He says when he goes to the ziyarat of Hur to pay respect, he says to Hur, this has been mentioned with his students, they have mentioned this, that he speaks to Hur. He says, oh Hur, I am a Sayyid. So obviously I am better than you. Sayyid is better than non-Sayyid, right? I am a scholar. I am the Marja scholar. You are not a scholar. I am better than you. But oh Hur, I come to you to pay respect. Because the guarantee that you have, I don't have. That is the handkerchief of Fatima Zahra that was tied by Husayn. You have that, I don't have that. Once again, Karbala is full of symbolism. Like I've been mentioning, it is a historical event. Imam Husayn said this, Imam Husayn did that. We may take that as being masayib, musibat, and cry. But there is a lot of symbolic reality behind that. That's the beauty of Karbala. Karbala is a place where the heaven and earth meets. What is handkerchief? So many things been mentioned about Rumal, about the handkerchief of Fatima. She goes to the places where the Majalis of Husayn is to collect the tears from the Mu'mineen in her handkerchief. Handkerchief is the source of salvation. That was given to her. Our tears, which are in the handkerchief of Zahra, are the source of our nijat, of our salvation. That symbolism is there. So, Hazrat Muhsin Hakim फरमाते हैं कि ऐ हुर, तेरे पास वो है जो मेरे पास नहीं। मैं सैयद हूँ, मैं आलिम हूँ, लेकिन तेरे पास रुमाल फातिमा है। ये रुमाल फातिमा का जो मौजिज़ा है, जब सफवी दौर के बादशाह थे, उनको पता चला कि حر نے پانی بند کیا تھا، حر نے امام حسین کو روکا تھا، اور حر کی وجہ سے ہی جو امام حسین کربلا میں رک گئے اور وہاں پہ شہید ہوئے۔ تو جب صفوی بادشاہ چاہتا تھا کہ معصومین کے حرموں کو بنایا جائے تو حر کی خبر تو دور تھی، جیسا آپ جاتے ہیں زیارت کے لیے، گنج شہیدہ میں حر کی خبر نہیں ہے، تو وہ کہنے لگا کہ میں یہ چاہتا ہوں اور میں یہ روایتوں میں سنا ہوں کہ حر کے پیشانے پہ رومال فاطمہ باندھا گیا، میں یہ چاہتا ہوں کہ رومال لے لو۔ بادشاہ تھا، حکم دیا، اور پھر نبش خبر کی گئی، اور جب نبش خبر ہوا، خبر کو کھولا گیا تو حر کا جسد، حر کی باڈی ویسی تھی جس طرح سے اس طرح سے دفنائی گئی تھی، اور وہ رومال فاطمہ حر کے پیشانی پہ تھا، اور بادشاہ کہتا ہے کہ رومال نکالو۔ جب یہ رومال نکالا گیا تو تازہ خون حر کے پیشانی سے آیا اور خبر خون سے بھر گئی، اور یہاں پر بادشاہ نے کہا یہ رومال باندھ دو، کیونکہ جو حسین دیتے ہیں اسے واپس لیا نہیں جا سکتا۔ حسین نے یہ رومال فاطمہ کا عطا کیا تھا، اس حور کا انعام تھا، حور کی قبولیت بخشش اور حور کا توبہ قبول ہونے کی سند تھی رومال فاطمہ، کیونکہ جب حور کربلا عاشور کے دن میں وہ امام حسین کی طرف دوڑتا ہوا چلا آیا، بعض روایتوں میں لکھا گیا ہے کہ اس نے اپنے بیٹے سے کہا میرے ہاتھ باندھ دو، اپنے بیٹے کے ساتھ امام حسین کے پاس آیا اور اپنے آپ کو حسین کے قدموں پر گرا لیا، اور حسین نے اپنے آغوش میں حر کو لیا، اور پھر حر سے کہنے لگے کہ تو میرا مہمان ہے لیکن میرے پاس پانی بھی نہیں ہے کہ میں تجھے پانی دے سکوں، میں مہمان نوازی نہیں کر پاؤں گا۔ یہاں پہ حر گریا ہو کے کہنے لگا میرے آقا میرے مولا کیا میری توبہ قبول ہے؟ تو امام نے فرمایا کہ اللہ نے بھی تیری توبہ قبول کی ہے، میں نے بھی تیری توبہ قبول کی ہے، اور جو تیرا نام ہے جو حر ہے آزاد، تیرے ماں نے صحیح نام دیا ہے اور تو آزاد ہے، اس دنیا میں بھی آزاد ہے اور آخرت میں بھی آزاد ہے۔ تو آقا میرے مولا مجھے اجازت دے کہ کیوں نے میرے طرف سے آپ یہاں آئے ہیں کہ میں جاؤں بیویوں کے قیام کی طرف اور معافی مانگوں۔ جب حر قیام کی طرف، بیوی زینب کے قیام کی طرف پہنچا، بیویوں کی گریے کی آواز آنے لگی، زینب نے حر کو سلام بھیجا، حر گریا کرنے لگا، کیونکہ زینب کوئی بھی امام حسین سے ملحق ہوتا تھا تو زینب خوش ہوتی تھی کہ میرے بھائی کا مددگار آ گیا ہے۔ یہاں پر معافی مانگتے ہوئے حر نے کہا کہ میں سب سے پہلے شہید ہونا چاہتا ہوں۔ امام نے اجازت دی، حر اور حر کا بیٹا دونوں شہید ہونے، دونوں جنگ کے لیے گئے۔ بعض روایتوں میں لکھا ہے کہ حر نے اپنے بیٹے کو پہلے بھیجا، اور وہ یہ چاہتا تھا کہ بیٹے کا ایمان ثابت رہے اور بیٹی کی شہادت اس کے سامنے ہوئے، اور یہ ہوا۔ اور جب بیٹا شہید کیا گیا تو حر دوڑا اپنے بیٹے کی لاش پہ آتا ہے، لیکن حسین نے اجازت نہیں دی کہ وہ اپنے بیٹے کی لاش اٹھائے، کیونکہ حسین کہتے تھے میں جانتا ہوں کہ اس کی تکلیف کیا ہوتی ہے۔ کچھ ہی گھنٹوں بعد حسین اکیلے ہیں اور علی اکبر چھوٹے چھوٹے بچوں سے کہتے ہیں کہ آؤ حسین کی مدد کرو کہ اکبر کا لاشا اٹھایا جائے۔ یہاں پہ راوی نے لکھا ہے، روایتوں میں لکھا گیا ہے کہ حر میدان میں حاضر ہوا اور جنگ کی، کیا مارکے کی جنگ کی، کفار کو واصل جہنم کیا، لیکن کہا گیا کہ حر کو چاروں طرف سے گھیرا گیا تھا اور پھر حملے ور ہوئے، اور جب حر گھوڑے کی زین سے زمین پر گر رہا تھا اپنے آقا اور اپنے مولا کو سلام کہتا ہے کہ میں اب عبداللہ میرا سلام آخر قبول ہو۔ یہاں پر بعض روایتوں میں ہمیں یہ واضح طور پہ نہیں ملتا کہ حسین شہداء کے سرانے گئے ہیں، لیکن حر کی روایت میں یہ ضرور ملتا ہے کہ امام حسین حر کے سرانے گئے ہیں اور پھر حر کو اپنے آغوش میں لیا ہے، اور جب حر کی پیشانی سے خون جاری ہوتا ہے تو رومال فاطمہ کو حسین نے باندھا ہے، اور پھر اس کے بعد گریہ کیا ہے اور ماتم کیا ہے حر کی جسد پہ اللہ لعنت اللہ اللہ قوم الظالمین سیعلم الذین ظلموا ای منقلبین ینقلبون ماتم حسین یا 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 حسین